Well, I grew up in a small community, Kelowna, Iowa. It's a Mennonite community. I grew up on a dairy and hog farm, row crops. As a 5-year-old, my dad took me to my first tractor pull. It was back in the days when you'd hang a chain on the side of the tractor so that if the chain came off the ground, they were DQ'd. Stepping on the drag on behind the tractor. So that was kind of what I fell in love with. Started looking. I was going to build a tractor. I come across this one, and it was without an engine, so we picked it up.
Whose chassis is that? Whose chassis is that, Gary?
There's a Stewart. I can't think of his last name. I guess it won in the 540 cube class. I don't know all these other classes out east, but it came out of Virginia, was built there originally. Okay. And it won in 2010, whatever Winter Nationals, wherever they were at that year in that class.
Yep.
Probably. And then it went from there up to Penn Yan, New York, and it was rebuilt, Kastner Performance. That's when the tube chassis, suspension, and all that got put on it. And there's a twin to it up there owned by Jeremy Prouty. This one was his boss's tractor, I guess. And his boss got out of it through a series of events. It didn't run for a couple of years, but I ended up with it over 2 years ago, for sure, almost over 3 years ago. And it was just a project getting it built. Of course, Denny Healy is 30 miles from my house. So
yeah, those ambush guys, they tend to know how to make tractors run. So
yeah. So when I was ready to build a motor, I said, let's build one that's going to win. So he pretty much threw everything at it.
Was this your first full year pulling with ECI, Gary?
Yes, 2024 is then the first year I got to where I pulled. I mean, I was always a fan, win a lot, but in 22, I went to almost every pull, hung out in the pits, didn't let anybody really know who I was because I wasn't sure on the class yet. And then in 23, I started to kind of introduce myself and figure out a little bit more about how this works and what it takes, and prepared for 24. So when I got off the farm, I got into mechanic work, owned a repair shop and towing business in Iowa City for 12 years, transitioned out of that, and I got into insurance. And so for about 25 years, I started one, which was extremely hard, but I purchased, bought, and sold 10 agencies in that period of time. And now I'm doing business consulting, and we're doing some different podcasts. Have the Mindset Growth podcast, which is kind of what started and got me started with podcasts. It's all more or less motivational, personal development type of podcast. We have guests on, but we also do a lot of it just with my partner and I. Doing some things there. When this came along, the thing that was probably impressionable to me was, I lost my father when I was 15 years old, and I realized how much history just disappears when somebody's gone. And so my kids don't know really who their grandfather is. Culturally, we didn't really, we didn't have any video or anything. And of course, back then we didn't have much probably anyway. So I just felt it important to try to record all these old stories, and we're going into more and more shops if we can. But I've received some requests with Breaking Barriers now that people are seeing those, that they are getting. I've got 2 of them where people have cancer, and the families are wanting me to do interviews with them to try to retain that history. It's easy to tell all those stories, but once they're gone, it's hard to kind of put them all together. So
yeah,
that to me has been really rewarding.
What's your favorite memory of 2024 pulling season? And one was like, why in the hell did I do this? Because every puller has that moment, like, why do I do this? Tell me some stories.
I believe the first win was good, but probably one of the most fun experiences, where were we at? Makokata. And I was the second hook. They reset the sled. They had a young flagger at the end of the track. And by the time I got to him, I mean, I had a full head of steam. He starts waving the red flag, and I thought, over my dead body, will I pull this throttle back? And he's running after me, and my son was videoing it, and he's running after the tractor, waving the red flag, and as I blew right on by him.
Is that on your?
What was your experience in Cloverdale like, especially pulling in a couple of different classes?
Go ahead.
Huh?
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say you pull in your 8500 limited pro stock, but you also jumped into that 9000 super farm, which I'm not super familiar with. But tell us about pulling in two different classes while you're out there.
Yeah, I don't really know much about that. I had signed up for the 8500 limited pro and then just had Kyle Sullivan reach out to me and said, if you're going to go, you should sign up for this class as well. Make it worth your trip. And that way, if something happens, you at least got a chance to pull twice. So I did. I don't really know what the difference in the rules are. Both classes, we got to weigh the same. One thing I will say for Clint Tucker and his group, they run a really tight ship and they know what's going on. If there's an error or anything somewhere, he steps right up and handles it. I was so impressed with how the whole event went. But it was unique. Kind of been the story of the year for me. I didn't really know what to expect because I'd never done it before. So rolling in was just kind of like another pull for me. And I just told the kids with me, we're not drinking any beer till we're done. And we know where we're at.